Hey everybody, welcome into Guerilla Sports Off Ice. JJ Jerez, Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley. After day 2 of training camp here, coming to you from Family Sports, a little on the scene podcast, videocast, whatever you want to call it. Videocast, yeah. It's my new thing. Just see if it catches on. I think now that we're in day 2, we're learning a little bit more. We're getting to see some consistency out of some guys, or maybe a lack thereof. Just getting a little bit more of a grasp on what's been going on here at camp just after day 2. We still have 2 more days of this, so I'm sure by the end of the weekend we'll have a much better idea of all the competition and all the open spots here for the NHL squad, of course. As Jared Bednar mentioned yesterday, the AHL squad is going to be pretty stacked, considering there's a lot of borderline guys here, right? So I guess let's just start with some overall observations from day 2 so far, and then we can get into some of the details after that.
I'll start. First, big shout out to the folks here at Family Sports for setting us up with a nice little setup here to get the pod knocked out. And then, started to see that the stands started filling up a little bit more today. I think it's going to be even crazier tomorrow. My observation, my biggest takeaway from today really stems, and I don't want to be jumping too far ahead in the rundown here, but it was when we got to talk to Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. And not, again, I know we'll get into a lot of what he said later.
No, go ahead.
But it was the mentality and the mindset that he was talking about, that not only he's trying to bring, this year being on a PTO, but just saying that the intensity that is, taking place. I don't know the right way to say this, but the level of play out on the ice right now, that he was saying, like, you can tell guys are competing for roster spots. You can tell that there's, desperation to show out the right way, and that he was saying, he's able to feed on that. And we talked a lot yesterday in the days leading up about this being a camp that maybe feels a little bit different than recent camps, because there is so much more up for grabs this year than what we've seen recently. And I feel like that's translated. Even Logan O'Connor told us at the end of the day, Burgundy line wasn't very good out there today. Like, they are already at that point on day 2 where that wasn't good enough. We got to go have a bounce back day tomorrow. When we heard that from Bellemare, I really tried to pay extra attention to that for the second session, of how much is that intensity really kind of ratcheted up maybe versus what we've seen in years past. And again, maybe it's just that it's now in my head, but it really did seem like it was translating on the ice.
What I think is interesting about Bellemare's commentary too is he's in a group separate from McKinnon and Drouin and Rantanen, and you're still seeing the carryover of that intensity from other players that are in that session, right? Taves and Manson are in the Bellemare group, and it is a carryover just because of how strongly the culture has been embedded in all of the Avalanche players that are represented there. So even a Middlestat, who spent not even a full season, is kind of a big driver in the forward group in that session that is with Bellemare included. And so I think you see a lot more communication on the ice, because these are a lot of guys who are learning things maybe a bit more newly than the guys in the other group. I'm referring to them as group 1 and 2, but they skated opposite times today, so that could be a little bit confusing. But group 1, think of it as one, like with McKinnon and Rantanen, for the sake of this podcast.
I'm happy you're establishing
that. So group 1 is the top guys, right? And group 2 still has, as mentioned, the Taves, the Manson, Middlestat in there. And so it has also felt a little bit lopsided at times, but the differences I don't think are inherently negative. That is where I'm hearing the on-ice communication in the group 2, with a lot of players communicating with each other. They want to make a good impression, and you saw the physicality ramped up a little bit more. In the board battle drills today, you saw guys digging really deep and protecting the puck a little bit better, and also fighting for it a little bit more. And that's where I think there were some positive takeaways in a player like Nikolai Kovalenko, and there were also maybe some guys who showed well in the finesse and skill side of the drills, but in like the board battle component, there was maybe some concern about how that would stack up in an NHL game specifically. But Kovalenko emerged as a guy that I really liked in both situations. He has a really powerful wrist shot that found the back of the net a few times today, but he also was one of the stronger skaters in those board battle drills. And so I really like what Kovalenko has done to make a case for himself following what was a difficult task of being thrown into playoff games.
Yeah, a couple things from both of you, what you both have said so far. I feel like in Group 2, You're right. There was a lot more vocal. You heard them being a lot more loud. I feel in Group 1 it was more focus and attention and fine-tuning to some things. I think a couple guys did look a little bit shaky at some things you're used to seeing them do. You already brought up how Logan O'Connor wasn't necessarily pleased with what his line did today, but he's talking about fixing it. We also heard the same from Jared Bednar as well, right? I thought that was interesting, saying some guys are really looking great already in camp. Some guys I'd like to see more out of, and that's from the NHL group. So I thought that was unique and interesting, not necessarily something we're used to, right? Mm-hmm. And I would have to agree from watching today. I think you can tell we're still early in camp, mm-hmm. and it seems like a lot of players maybe took a different approach to this offseason. I mean, Nathan McKinnon said it himself at Media Day how he had a different approach. So I still think they're trying to smooth some things out, and we'll get there eventually. Nothing to worry about. I hope no Avs fans are hearing us say that and being like, oh, the team's done.
Right.
No, it's just early in camp, and you can see that in a lot of guys.
Do you remember was it 13-14, the half lockout season where there was no preseason, no training camp? There was literally, I think it was 3 days of practice, and then because of how compressed the schedule was, they just had to get into it. And those first 5 games for every team were some of the ugliest professional hockey you've ever seen in your life. That was the first time I was like, oh, preseason and training camp do mean something. Either of you have thoughts on Shillington from today? It looked like he was out there in not his gear.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it. We got our first look at him, which was nice to see kind of what he brings to the table. But you also had to take it with a grain of salt because you had to know he's not playing necessarily in his own gear or feeling super comfortable out there. I wouldn't say it affected him too terribly in either direction. I think there were spurts where you're like, oh, maybe he's not feeling himself
Mm-hmm.
right now. But I think overall he looked pretty fine.
I thought so too. He's an interesting specimen because his size on paper, the way that he moves, his speed is as advertised, and so he actually appears smaller than I thought just because of how quick he is. It's not to say that he played small in any capacity, and he's already got a little Avalanche in him. He had flubbed the puck and went over to the board and punched it in frustration, not in an anger management kind of way, just a guy who is clearly taking this very seriously, and I feel a lot of sympathy that he didn't get to start out on the right foot and still not having his own equipment.
Well, and the way that it all, it sounds like bad immigration issues. We were talking to a couple of guys in the locker room today who maybe have a little bit more insight on it, and there was an issue with his gear being able to get here, so they had to change course on it, try to get it shipped, and it got lost, and so it's been like you said, I definitely sympathize. It's not your typical hey, well, if you're out here, you got to be competing. There was a lot of cards stacked against Oliver Shillington the last couple days.
I definitely saw a little spurt of offense in his game, right? I think he's not afraid to jump across the blue line, something I kind of already knew about him, but it's nice to see that he's at a comfort level already with this team where he's not afraid to jump in and make a play when it's appropriate. So I saw him make a couple offensive plays that I was really like, oh, okay, I think I'm starting to like this guy. But while we're at it, let's talk the defensive competition, right? Because that's one of the biggest things we were keeping an eye on coming into this camp. And I think you could say the same for the D as the forwards right now. It doesn't feel like anybody's really running away with it. And not to say that it's because they're not bringing their best play. I think everybody has elevated their game and understands the competition and what's at stake, that nobody's really separated. You're seeing a lot of good stuff out of the guys who are competing for spots.
And we won't, what I'm about to say here, we won't see it until after, at least Monday with the first game. I'm for that stuff, for the defensive roster battles, I'm not expecting to see anyone really start to separate till we can whittle this down just a little bit. There's a lot of defensemen in each group. Again, because, right now you really do. You've got the Avs, the Eagles, and even some of the Grizzlies here. So, this... I just feel like it's hard right now with the drills that they're doing, with the amount of people they have. I feel like it's going to be hard for any one guy to truly separate. I think we'll be able to see some flashes, some bursts here and there, but I want to see them kind of get through a couple of these cuts here, and then I think you're going to really start to see Malinsky, Brandstrom, Shillington, and even DeHaan a little bit. Because that's the group that we're wanting to see them separate amongst, and I'm going to start to see how they split out from that smaller group.
Something I thought about today is how training camp isn't really designed to evaluate goaltenders, for example.
Yes.
They're getting peppered with shots. But even to a different extent, the way you evaluate defensemen, you can see a lot of things that the defensemen do well defensively, but you don't get to see the offense flash as much as you would in game situations. And so there have been a lot of things I've noted that Brandstrom has done well defensively. He closes up on the gap and eliminates time and space very well. But I actually haven't been able to really evaluate their offensive upside yet in a way that I think, to your point, when we see them in a given situation, that's when we can see them really flex that side of their game that I don't think we've really tapped into for all of these players. Because I've seen great defensive things out of Calvin DeHaan, and I want to give him credit. He has impressed me more than I thought coming into this camp. I like his fit and his movement more than I thought I was going to. And similarly,
The movement, I definitely agree with you on.
yes, I think I set the expectations a little too low for what he would be capable of there. And so I really like just his fit in camp so far. And that, is where I think in a game situation that will translate very similarly, but I think Brandstrom has even more offensively than we've even seen, but you've seen flashes of it already. Same with Shillington, that instinct was so obviously there. I actually feel Malinsky's had kind of a tough camp. I don't think this environment is the best to showcase what he does well. Kind of similar to what Belmar said about what his value as a player isn't always appreciated when a team is losing.
Yeah.
I think that Malinsky's value as a player isn't always appreciated in training camp, and I am excited to see what he does in a game situation.
Well, so not only the offensive side of the game, and I mean, I guess this kind of goes hand in hand with it, but like the transition part of the game as well, because I feel like that was something that really impressed me with Sam Malinsky last year in his call-ups, was having the puck on his stick in his own end. He never seemed panicked. He never seemed overwhelmed. He never seemed jittery. I thought he was calm, poised, collected. And to your point, a lot of these drills that they run through out at these camps, not only are they, because you and I were joking about this, they're brutal for goalies, but yeah, there's just a lot of elements of some of these players' games, especially on the back end, where you don't get to see the skating through the neutral zone and that first pass out from behind the net, things like that, in addition to everything you're talking about. So yeah, I'm anxious to see them open it up a little bit more.
Yeah, I did like the moments I saw Shillington and Brandstrom paired up together. That kind of excited me a little bit, but you guys are right. There was a lot of 2-on-1s. We saw 3-on-2s. We saw 5-on-2s. So we got to see the showcase of defensive play with that. And this is no surprise to anybody, but I think Cale Makar looks fantastic.
Yeah, what a great call. I kind of forget that we're also watching the big guys.
Right, so I definitely don't think he's on that list of guys who need to step it up and maybe be a little bit more up to
He's
par.
humbling guys.
He looks amazing. I mean, even when he was going up against Rantanen and McKinnon, he was shutting them down. McKinnon and Drouin, they couldn't get passes across the ice to each other because Cale Makar was right there with that active stick. So I really liked what he's been doing.
He looks healthy, and that what you're saying and what you guys, that was why I wanted to ask Jared Bednar what I asked him about, like what are you looking for out of those guys in a week, especially these first 4 days where you have so many young guys, and I think there is a lot of evaluation going on for the bottom half of the lineup, and so it feels a little easy to forget that Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar and Mikko Rantanen, like, you want to see positive stuff out of them too. You want to see that, again, they're healthy, they're moving well, or whatever it is. And I think, I'll at least speak for myself, you can kind of look past that a little bit because you're kind of like, yeah, McKinnon's amazing, Makar's amazing. But when you stop and look at him, you're like, looking pretty good.
Yeah, I think for a second I was kind of questioning, like, does McKinnon have what he normally has in the bag right now? And then right as I was thinking that, he just blows right past Sean Behrens, and I don't know if he scored, but he definitely got the puck on net and just made a very McKinnon-esque play. So yeah, it's tough to evaluate everything while the chaos is all going on. There was a moment where there was a group of people at center ice and they're trying to run plays through them. I think Ross Colton bumped it into Oscar Olausson. So there's just chaos everywhere. It's tough to really get a good finger on the pulse of what's going on.
I like when they get through enough guys that they can take it down to one bigger group. Just because at that point you're NHL guys, your bubble guys, and then your high-end AHL guys. And again, I just really feel like that's where we start getting a little bit more refined. There just are still a lot of guys out here that they'll play the first preseason game, maybe the first road preseason game or something like that, and then there'll be some adjustments.
When you mentioned the question to Bednar, what I keyed in on was his mention of leadership and what he's looking to see out of the top guys, because that was a difference from yesterday and today that I felt was observed in Group 1. I felt I was seeing Duran, McKinnon, and Rantanen talking to other players a lot more today. And, just explaining things to them or giving them insight, right? I'm not on the ice. I don't know what they're saying.
Even you and I mentioned Ross Colton and Jean-Luc
Foudy had a lengthy conversation to open their session, and so I hope, if it's in Foudy's best interest.
To be talking to.
Exactly.
That's a good player for him to be talking to.
I hope he's leaning on Ross Colton for insights heavily.
Yeah, no, that's a good person.
Well, yeah, while we're at it, let's look at the forward competition, right? I think we can pencil in Belmar as making one of those depth spots.
You think so? I mean, I tend to agree with you. I found the PTO for him interesting because to me it seemed like such an easy, yep, you bring him back, he's familiar with the room. But then he made that comment today of like, these guys need to see I'm almost 40. And the way he said was, can this guy still play? And so maybe that's what it is. But I agree with you so much that I thought it was a natural fit that I was surprised that it was just a PTO. And that's the only thing that just kind of keeps a little bit of seed of doubt in my head. Is like, why wouldn't they have just given him the deal?
Well, I think I've read between the lines a little bit, right? And I think a couple days ago, if not yesterday, the phrase I heard that stood out to me was, what was it exactly? Just how he has a spot, right? Well, I think it was Bednar saying that C-Mac called him over the summer and said, he has a spot if he can still skate, essentially, right? We had to see him and his training and his fitness, and I think he's been up to par with that. He's been just as fast as everyone out there. I think there's a reliability at center there from him that the team really likes, and, the center position is kind of a spot that they're kind of a little shaky on. So if they have somebody who's rock solid at the center spot, I think that's somebody they're leaning to. Then, I'm an eavesdropper. I like to listen to conversations that maybe I shouldn't. And I heard a member of the team going up to Belmar and talking to him a little bit, and he goes, normally I'd be all about that. Let me make the team first. I don't want to jinx anything, and then I'll be all over that kind of stuff. So there's maybe a little seed of doubt in his mind, but I think overall that's why I said pencil in, right? I didn't say
pen.
I didn't say ink.
You didn't say pen.
So I think I'll go with 75% certainty. I think he makes this team.
I just real quick, and I want to hear what your thoughts on PEB. I might just drop in his entire interview right here on the pod because he was fantastic today. Day 2, how you feeling?
I felt good. It was a little bit heavier in the beginning because obviously, late group yesterday and then early group today, like a quick turnaround. But I felt guys looked good and practice was fast, so it was fun.
Is there any kind of mindset change, this year for you, PTO, trying to get to that deal, or do you approach it the same way you have every year?
No, I mean, before, like it's never been like I come into a camp thinking like, I have a safe spot. Like I'm a plug type player, so it's like you have to grind to show that you have a value. And if I play at a 98%, then I'm useless. And I think that maybe the PTO is the thing that make me want it more than like in the past. Maybe I've been complacent, a little bit satisfied, not like consciously, more like I feel like I try to go hard, and then now I see the way I'm driven right now. I was like, okay, I was missing that last year, right? So I think that's maybe more. That's the little start on the fire, right? I feel like maybe there's a little spark, a little bit, yeah.
And then, the familiarity with this group, and not just the organization, the team, but knowing what the expectations are, and the compete level from guys like McKinnon and all that. How much does that help, kind of add to that little?
I mean, like I said it before, when your top guys are the guys that grind the hardest, like you're already set as a culture, like for the whole team. Then for me personally, it's just like seeing those guys, and they're the best in the world, and they're always there. Like I've always been one of the guys that wanted to do more because I've always felt like I started too late, right? I've been behind everybody. But now I'm here and it's more like, okay, well, they're still doing it. I'm still doing it. I'm still having fun doing it. So it's like this familiarity of the guys that I know and the organization and the trainers like makes it so like it's almost like I want it even more, right? Because like I know how good it was, I know how good it is, and now I know how good it can be. So let's do it.
How much can you use your experience to maybe not do too much here at training camp? You know, like to focus and showcase your skill set specifically.
I mean, like, do they expect me to come here and like take Mac's spot? Nope. Like do they expect me to be reliable defensively and like to work hard every minute I have on the ice, every second I have? Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is just do that. It's not changing who I am as a person. It's just do a little bit more of it, right? I never needed like a ASC or whatever leadership type word on my back for me to go and talk to young guys and talk to my line and make sure like the practice is loud and everything. This is how I think it's fun. Well, it's fun to play on the ice. If a guy score, I want to cheer him on. If he makes a bad pass, I want to chirp him. That's the way it is, right? So, and I don't think they expect me to change any of that. I think that that's who they know I am as a person, and I'm just trying to do that, but show them that I still have the drive, right? Because that's, I think, the biggest question is that, all right, this sucker is almost 4 years old. Like, can he still play, right? And I think that's what I want to show them.
Billy, what's the strongest part of your game right now? Obviously, we know how adept you are at the faceoffs, but being smart defensively as well. But what do you feel like at this moment the biggest strength in your game is that you can bring to this team?
I feel like it's been like, especially, I mean, like the value that I have is it's kind of like you can't see it if we lose every game, right? Because like if I block 2-3 shots and I play good in the kill and my line look good as a line, and we lose 3-0, like nobody's going to care about the defensive role and but in a team that is a good team and that that's right to win every night, that block shot might be the difference. That face-off one at the right time when you lose the momentum, when the guy realizes, all right, and like your fourth line with me in the middle, like we talk. We're going to talk every day. We're going to try to make ourselves better every day. And the fact that we're going to know exactly where we are on the ice is going to make us look better, right? And this is what I think has been a strong part of my game, is always taking care of my line and make sure that everybody feels comfortable in the line, to make sure that we look a little bit better than who we are individually as a person, right?
Played opposite this Avs team the last few seasons. What is your impression of where this team is within their competitive window? What makes them difficult to play against?
Well, I mean, it's a fast team. Like I said before, their top guys are the guys that show the way, but not in a way that like they're cheating the game. They are often, you can show their clip as the best defensive clip. They're not cheating the puck. They are the one that are the best forecheck. They're working hard. They're not forcing the play. And then like I think it's like, like it's competitive in practice. Like because of these guys, like they put the level so high that everybody's got to come every day in a PTO mindset. Like I have to show the organization I want it, right? Because if your top guys come and they just like F around, then it's gonna trigger this domino effect to the next guy, right? But because here, like I mean, let's be honest, it's a cup. Like it's either you win the cup or you like that's nothing else. That's the way the organization is talking about. So it's exciting, it's fun, and that's what's make them so difficult to play against. Because there is not a single second when those guys are gonna take a shift off, right? They are gonna go at you like a tornado constantly.
Seeing McKinnon and Rantanen on your wife's cooking episode,
Yeah.
It's an environment we don't normally get to see them in.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the friendships you've built within this group?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been too loud of a guy in the locker room, and I've always been like one of the oldest too. So somehow, these guys that work very hard every day, like I'm here before them and I do my stuff. So there is kind of right from the get-go when I got here, there was kind of a respect mutual that came down. Like, all right, he's disciplined, he does his job, and then I think that those guys also understand the value of, like we have guys that are there ready to lay their body in front of the puck for the team, right? And so we get closer and closer, and I warned my wife that like when we're going to do that, like a lot of those guys that we have at home are top guys. I don't know if they want to come to our place and like have a home cooked meal there, but actually like Nate and Mikko and Landy too were some of the first ones to answer yes right away, and it was an amazing dinner, and it was fun, especially the time like it was after we lost against you guys, and like they come to my house and to our house and we have a nice dinner, and it feels like shit, like I know, like these are buddies, right? Even if the next day we battle hard at it, right? So it's fun.
I just thought super insightful, extremely honest,
Very open. Yeah.
very open about the whole situation, and I walked away from that and I was like, yeah, give this guy a deal, purely for that alone.
I'm permanent sharpening him into the lineup.
Okay, all right.
And you know what I was thinking about a lot? With all the stuff coming out of Philly about Erik Johnson, and it predates to what we've been seeing about his mischief, but also the way that he made an effort to reach out to Michkov before it coming over. I think about how last year in the interviews that came out over the summer, there was maybe some implication that there could be cliques at times. And I think back to the influence that Erik Johnson had in the locker room and how he had a way of bringing everyone into the fold and really initiating new people as well. I see a lot of that in Belmar. That's the long-winded way of getting to that. I think of him as a necessary glue piece that's not been totally missing, but EJ left big shoes to fill that I feel one player alone. Like, I think a player like Logan O'Connor actually does this very well too, but I think LOC alone doesn't fill EJ's shoes. I think a player like Belmar is really necessary in the room. I think that he's got guys in the leadership core who would vouch for him. And then in looking at his on-ice play, he can still keep up with the pace and the intensity, and he has decent hands still. And so I just don't see why not.
Well, and then as you were talking, I was just sitting there as you were talking about the leadership, and I was just running through it in my head. And I said, okay, if you bring him in, you know, in regards to the clicks, because I feel like there were times last year where it felt a little obvious on.
I don't want to like go hard conspiracy theory because we're in that room and we're not seeing like harsh divide in the locker room.
But I felt like, especially when, you know, I talked to Devon Taves last year in Chicago after that loss, and he said there's guys who think they're playing well and I think they're kidding themselves.
Wasn't that Vegas?
Was it Vegas? No, I talked to it was Nate after Vegas. But it felt relatively easy for everyone to kind of piece together who he was talking about. And now if you bring in a guy like Belmar, especially when you get your, you know, all of your guys back, you have a strong leader on every line. And like Logan O'Connor, Miles Wood, they were, you know, you can go check out the interview that we did with LOC in the locker room. You know, Miles Wood just giving him a really hard time. You know, they really seem to be getting along well. Logan said that he's really looking forward to getting to play with Miles and Ross Colton again this year. I just think that, yeah, suddenly you have a guy like Belmar in that bottom six who I do just think will change a little bit of the leadership dynamic for the bottom half of the lineup. And I totally see what you're saying, Megan. Like, it's just another really strong voice to keep things on the rails when, you know, times get tough. And they might this year, especially in the first half of the year. I think a guy like Belmar is almost more valuable to you in the locker room than he is on the ice, even though, to your point, like he can still play, and that's obvious this week.
They've got some locker room hurdles, not to go on too much of a tangent, but when Val Nichushkin does try to make his return, I think, you know, with Landeskog in the fold too, hopefully also back on the team at that point, they're going to need all the leadership that they can to help unite the room.
Well, and it'll be good to have, it would be good if they choose to move forward with Belmar, to have a strong leader, a good president who wasn't part of that.
That's a good point.
The last 2 years, who doesn't have that, you know, not that I'm sure Belmar, you know, takes it any more lightly, but he wasn't part of that, like, emotional scarring that, you know, we heard Jared talk a little bit about the last couple days of just, like, the emotions were high. People feel certain ways. There's some guys who probably need to see and hear some things from Val. And on the flip side of that, there's some guys that, you know, need to get to the forgiveness part of it. Belmar doesn't have to deal with any of that. He can just come in and be a leader and say, hey, we're moving forward. You know, because when you run into those types of conflicts, that's all you can do. Especially in the situation the Avs are in now with Val Nichushkin. All you can do is move forward. He's under contract. You can't move him. You can't trade him. It would do you no good to buy him out, you know, when he gets back. So your only option is to move forward, and I think having a strong voice in the room that could completely separate the emotions from it, because he probably doesn't have that, I think would be really good.
And then there's the element, we've talked so much the last couple days about the culture of the team, right? And we've heard a lot about it, too, from the players. When we finished our interview with Bellemare today, cameras went off, went in a different direction. One writer stayed there and was still talking to him, so I stayed there to listen because he's such a fascinating guy to listen to, right? And he's kind of brought up the point of how his entire career he's always been chasing something. He's always had something to really motivate him to make sure he's working hard. At this point in his career, it's just simply staying in the league. So I think he's just ingrained with that hard work mentality that the Avalanche cherish so much around here and just fits the culture so perfectly. He even mentioned some days he shows up before McKinnon. He shows up before Rantanen. And, those guys show up early and get their work in too. So just simply being that great fit in the culture that we cherish so much, I think is another way to maybe start Sharpieing instead of just a pencil.
Yeah,
King
cowards.
size, the real smelly one. The other thing too that I thought was interesting that Bellemare mentioned was the fact that he's lost in the Stanley Cup final twice, and now being near the end of his career, that's something that really does push and motivate him. Like, I want to get over the hump, including losing to this team that he's trying to make right now. And I forgot that he was part of the Vegas team that first year that lost. So just to hear him talk about that, because I was going to ask him about, like, does coming so close and not getting it, how much is that in your brain right now? And then he was the one that brought it up before I could even ask. Yeah, not only did I lose to these guys, but I lost that first year in Vegas. And so, especially with his career coming near an end, regardless of if he makes his team or not, that has to be something that is like a relentless, I'm going to do everything I can to try to get that.
What an endorsement of this Avs group, too, that he said, and these are my best chances at getting a cup in my final years.
Looking at the rest of the forward competition, because there's still a spot left, right? You kind of mentioned Kovalenko's name. It sounds like he has a slight edge over some of the guys, but like I mentioned, I don't think anybody's really played that significantly better than the other guy next to him. There's a lot of guys that I think have their name seriously in the hat. And, man, if I'm Jared Bednar, that's a tough decision to make because there's so many capable bodies, the Foodies, Olausens, Richie, absolutely. It's going to be such a tough decision, and that spot is still open.
That was quite the face on Richie.
Well, Bednar was listing names today, and he excluded Richie's. Probably just a blip. Right. But I key in on that immediately, that he's talking about some of these players.
What have you thought of Cal? I was running around a little bit during the second session,
which is Group 1.
I was gonna say, did you hear me have to during the Group 1 Session 2, I was running around.
I'm so happy Meghan established that early, so we didn't keep crisscrossing. And
what have you thought of him through 2 days with here at main camp?
I think that he's done a lot of things well. I just haven't seen him separate, and honestly, to JJ's point, no one really has among the forward group. I think Kovalenko probably has the inside track of everyone.
Jared, high praise on him.
Outstanding were his words. Outstanding today in the session, and I agreed with that assessment. I noticed the contrast in Kovalenko, and maybe to Richie's detriment, he is in that Group 1, and he's with the other young players, which I think is no coincidence. They're not being balanced with the veteran player on their line rushes, and so I think it is challenging them, kind of this internal competition among one another, but also they rely on one another to lift each other up. So they are capable of making each other look good, and if they don't give their best to their line mate, they will also look bad.
That feels, it has to be very, very intentional, right?
I have to imagine it is. It also creates, though, the challenge of just they make young mistakes together, too, at times. And so, maybe it's a cop-out to point to how training camp isn't the best environment to evaluate anyone. I was giving everyone some allowances earlier, but I think it's true of Richie. I've said this about his World Junior Showcase over this summer. I've said this about his rookie face-off appearance. I think that he shows best in game situations, and I think that more is needed for me to evaluate where Richie's at. Because of his kind of crop of 3, Foodie and Richie are kind of at the top of it. Olausens still, I feel, need to see more, and he's another who in a game situation could be better, but it's just hard for me to separate Olausson in that. It's kind of like Foudy and Richie have emerged a little bit ahead of him. And Foudy honestly might even have the inside track of that group, just because I see the NHL polish a little more in him in this setting, and the calm. And I just feel like that is what has been maybe missing for me with Richie, just in 2 very brief viewings of him in training camp.
So I want to, with Olausson, because we talked about him earlier this week or last week. I don't know what day it is, guys. About how that was a guy that we know that he can score goals, but what else can he do, kind of thing. When we were talking to Drew N, he mentioned that he used to set goals for himself in terms of production, and that he doesn't anymore. I asked him about, are you looking to build on what you did last year, career year? And he told me, every time in my career I've started thinking about the points and goals is when they dry up, so that he doesn't do that anymore, and that he focused last year on rounding out his game, and that he found himself in positions to contribute. And we were talking about the fact that Jared Bednar talks about that. Put in the work, play the right way, and you'll be shocked how often you find yourself in a position to use your skill that you're great at. That is something that I think, hearing Jonathan Drouin talk about that today and saying that that is the hallmark of this team, is we don't focus on the points and the goals. We know that's going to come with the talent that we have here. We're focused on being as complete of a group as possible. When I look at that line of Olausson, Richie, Foudy, I completely agree with your assessment of, to me, the Richie and Foudy have shown that these are more well-rounded players, as where Olausson, I feel like I really only notice him if he, snaps off a shot short side or does something offensively.
And he did something impressive today, to that end, and he flexed the powerful shot that we've come to know about him. It's just sort of become a bit one-dimensional, and we need to see a little bit more than that.
And I think when it comes to Richie, we all kind of have a little bit of a bias, I guess, because we're cheering for him. We're like, we don't want you to go back to the OHL, poor guy. That'd be terrible for you. But I think if you take a step back, there's still more to be desired there. Maybe a little bit more of a, I don't know what, just a little more, a big bag of knuckles, I think.
You want it, because of the expectations, first round pick, we can't go back. They want to put him on this NHL roster. You want to see him look like an NHL player. And I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that he hasn't looked good. I'm not saying that he hasn't had his flashes, but I think that's maybe what you're talking about, where it's I don't know what it is, but I want to see you really look like you belong.
I'm going to use Sean Behrens and Brian Woolsey's comments about him, how Sean Behrens became one of the best defensemen in college hockey. And there were things that he got away with in college hockey. And it's not to say that he was cutting corners. It's just the way that he executed defensively. He could get away with it at that level, and different routes are required at the pro level. I see something similar with Richie in terms of there are things I think that worked in terms of playmaking at the junior level that are not translating to this environment quite the same. You can still tell he's a high IQ player, but there is that difference that I think is going to take a little bit of adjustment, and why I also feel in 2 days of camp he hasn't completely impressed for the same reasons he impressed in juniors. I think he is also being confronted with that adjustment and how difficult it is to score as the goaltending also improves and the defense also improves.
All this is kind of temporary, once Lehkonen, Nichushkin, and Landeskog get inserted to the lineup, there's going to be very little room left. So maybe we're making a big deal out of nothing. They can kind of juggle and experiment with a lot of different guys. We have up to 9 games with Kyle Richie to see what he really brings into a game environment.
So just because I think you're right, and I think that is something that we're talking a lot about the roster battles, because right now there are. We know those spots are up for grabs. Given what you just said, it just kind of came to me for what I'm thinking. What I'm looking for from Richie, do what Logan O'Connor did the bubble year. Make it hard for them to take you out of the lineup. All these young guys that we're talking about here, that's what they got to be doing, because they're coming out of the lineup, especially if all 3 guys come back. Like we said earlier, that's a whole line. That is a whole line that you are just inserting back into a roster of 12 forwards. How can these guys like Foudy, like Richie, like Kovalenko make it so that you have no choice? You have to keep me in this lineup. And I think Kovalenko has shown out a little bit more on that front than the other
Just
two
a little
guys.
bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little. Also, a really nice guy, right? Really good energy about him. I really enjoyed talking to him today. But naming those three names, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, Landeskog, not being in the lineup, it makes me think about the power play, namely power play 1. Those are all three guys that would be in that middle spot on the power play. Right now, I'm kind of looking at this roster and like, who plays that role?
Casey.
Do you think so?
I think he'll be someone that'll get a look, Casey Middlestat, because the hands.
If he's in that spot in PP1, I don't think PP2 sniffs a minute, at least in the early parts of the season.
Yeah. I mean, you could what? Try Ross Colton there.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe Logan
Colton.
O'Connor could be just because he's got a little bit of grittiness to go in front of the net.
Just
But
like thinking of the whole 5-man unit.
yeah,
Would it be Drouin or is he?
I think Druin would be on PP1.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I'd maybe go, and like you said, you're really kind of running yourself thin on your second power play unit. But my brain goes to Casey Middlestat for what you talked about with him yesterday or 2 days ago. Hockey in a phone booth, being able to find pucks in and around the net, tipping pucks, things like that. But that I guess if you're not going to play PP2 anyways, which they hardly do, why keep Casey Middlestat for that?
Yep.
Just double shift Nathan McKinnon if you really want to, roll your second unit.
I'm just curious, is that too much to place on a guy like Casey Middlestat? Because we also know he's expected to play some penalty kill minutes too. So kind of being a three-faceted player, is he ready to make a leap like that with this still kind of being a fresh team for him?
I see an Arturi Lehkonen path for him, and those are the kinds of minutes and opportunities that he has to seize and seems eager to do so, and I can see that for Middlestat pretty easily.
Yeah, and I'll even take it a step further. I feel like you want to see that. Jared Bednar used the word stale for Casey Middlestat in Buffalo. He said, I think it got a little bit stale for him. So to me, I almost look at this, and again, we're always talking about the Avs' development and their ability to develop players. This is the part of it that I think gets left out a little bit. You look at a guy like Lehkonen and the strides that he's taken since he got to Colorado. That is player development. Val Nichushkin, that is player development. Logan O'Connor, that is player development. Just because it's not necessarily, you drafted this guy in the 4th round and you turned him into an NHL for 110 games. Perfect. You get to check this weird box that we use as an arbitrary number of 100 games to determine how well people draft. If we see Casey Middlestat take a significant step, and I agree with Megan, I think it's something that he absolutely can handle, that's player development. And what I liked so much about that addition at the deadline last year was you gave up Bowen Byram, but you reset your core's timeline a little bit with that acquisition. You got younger. When we were talking about who could the Avs be bringing in for that 2C spot, all of them were older guys that were already established, had maybe even been former first-line centers that we were now saying maybe at this point in their career they can play on the second line. Even Nazem Kadri in that role. He came to Colorado as an established player. Casey Middlestat is on the up, and he's still a young guy. There's a lot of room for development in Casey Middlestat's game.
Yeah, and I think he's gotten stronger, right? I mean, I know early in his career he was kind of knocked for not being able to do a pull-up. I definitely guarantee you he could do more than one pull-up
Casey.
now.
Can we ever just not mention it?
Well, maybe we need to ask him about it just to we're going to put this to bed.
We'll never speak of it again.
Yeah.
How many pull-ups you been doing, dog?
Well, I was going to say just what was that? Because that had to be embarrassing. Is that the right word? To be at the combine and to not be able to do it. Again, not that I'm knocking him for it now.
I mean, what, he was 17?
Well, I'm sure he knew
that's
this
what I'm
about
saying.
himself, right?
And I guess maybe that's the part. And maybe we should ask him that off the record. When you got there, were you a pull-up what?
Shit, pull-up
Pull-up.
bar.
Right.
A pull-up test?
I didn't get ready for this one.
My agent did not tell me that there was a pull-up test here. I would love to know if that was his, conversation.
Yeah. And I know we've already talked about it. It's a tough place for a goaltender, these training camps. They're getting shelled with shots. I need to see a little bit more out of Justus Annunen, though. I think Georgiev is in the same position as him, and he's making some saves. He's showing that awesome reaction time. I'm going to be the driver of the I don't believe in Justus Annunen bus. I know it's a very empty bus. There's not many of us on it. But for me, I just feel like he has yet to gain my confidence in the backup role.
He's always been, at the NHL level for me, a little too chaotic is the word that comes to mind. Struggles to control rebounds. Feels like he loses pucks in traffic sometimes after he's made a save. We've seen him, really overcommit and overslide, on trying to recover from, where he got a little bit out of position. He then gets himself way out of position. And it was the first couple things, where there's nothing like crazy happening out here where goalies are flying out of position, but it's the first few things that I listed there. I don't love his rebound control, and it feels like there's times where he makes a save, and then you see him doing this, trying to find it, and I just feel like that was the stuff that I was hoping to see cleaned up over the summer.
I saw him do that today.
I'm driving the bus that crashes into your bus. No, I don't feel as strongly about that.
I was going to say, what bus is that?
Yeah, I'm not driving a bus that's going to crash into anything, but I've watched a lot of Justus Annunen at the American League level, and he's an interesting goaltender. I think a lot of people, I'm not willing to write him off just yet. I think that goaltenders are better evaluated in rhythm, and that is with some, consistent gameplay and over that span of time. And so I felt what I saw from him in the string of games that he got with the Avs at the end of last year was more revealing to me of what Annunen is capable of, long term, like what he really is, versus this viewing. I'm just not going to read into it too much until I see what he does in a game setting over a span of a couple games. Because what you described, tracking the puck through traffic, rebound control, that's every goaltender everywhere, basically.
Yes, you are correct. I do just feel like I see him really struggling to find pucks that are down and around, not his feet, but he'll make a first save, and then again, you just see him. I feel like I see him really swimming to find it more so than a Georgiev or just.
I think Georgiev is dialed in right now. I don't see him losing rebounds. I see him controlling everything. I see him not sliding out of position. He hasn't ended up on his belly. Yeah, I think Georgiev has his game right now exactly where we want to see it, and if he can maintain what I've seen so far in camp, we're looking at a great season from Georgiev. Annunen still has to get there. Or as Bednar says, Annunen.
I do agree with you, though, Megan, that goaltending is such. I think it's the most difficult position in professional sports, and there's a lot of goalies that you never hear about that play in the NHL that all struggle to the same things. And I guess my only thing with Annunen was I was really hoping that with the fresh contract coming in, knowing he's the backup, I wanted to see some of that stuff get a little bit cleaned up. But you're also, as we've been saying, these drills are not made for them. I want to see him get into a game, and I want to see a little bit more, see what his composure looks like a little bit more behind the defense that we know the Avs like to play with, and when he's got a little bit more support and it's not just 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s, 5-on-2s coming down on him one after another.
It's so unorthodox. He's the NHL goalie, not me, so I don't know any better than he does. But when he's getting ready to face a shooter in any given drill, he's almost standing straight up. His stick is in the air.
Okay.
And then as the puck gets closer, he drops that stick and he eventually gets it on the ice. And that's just so different and weird, and just maybe a big reason that I'm just like, what's going on here? What?
He's a big dude.
He is big.
Big dude.
Yeah. Which is kind of the way of the goalie right now, right? You want size and strength in being able to be in position and square to the puck, and I think that's kind of what teams are looking for in a goalie nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else on the internet? No. You always just have a little bit of a mischievous look. I'm always waiting for like an airbag prank with Megan. She's just always looking at you like, any minute now, any minute.
All right, I will say in talking to Georgiev about Bednar's comments around Annunen, and hopefully the workload for Georgiev can be lessened. He's still the starter, but hopefully he can take some of that pressure off of Georgiev, right? Georgiev, I don't think, views it in that way. Georgiev says, well, it's still early. It's a long season. So I'll ride with Georgiev's confidence and how good he has looked in camp more than anything.
Yeah, well, we still have day 3 and 4
ahead. We got 2 more days of this.
So, yeah, we'll be back tomorrow to break some more stuff
Do
down.
this
won't we?
again. Big shout out to Mark, just for everything. He was here today and he just makes our lives easier and gets the best shots in town.
Yeah. Who haven't we talked to yet that you guys are maybe excited to dive into? Because we've talked to a lot of great guys. I mean, 12 guys so far that we've probably gotten interviews with. Anybody that you guys are anticipating still?
Mine's Gerard. We wanted to talk to him today, but we got caught up having a great conversation with Logan O'Connor, and so we missed G. But I'm anxious to talk to him. I just think that he was a different player coming back from player assistance program last year, and from everyone that I've talked to that is close with him, just said that again it was just different for him this summer, and that his personality is better, not better, but he's feeling more himself, and so he's someone I'd love to chat with.
There's guys that have done availability that I haven't personally gotten to talk to, like Mikko Rantanen. I haven't gotten to talk to Brandstrom, and so it's kind of a cop-out, but I do want to have more one-on-one conversations as the season goes on, and it gets a little easier to do that.
I do have to keep reminding myself in some of these scrums, I'm like, oh, I need to get every question in, but it's like, nope.
I don't even need to get one.
I can wait. I'll see you in a week. I'll see you tomorrow. I can ask you then.
I'll see you tomorrow even.
I have really loved the dynamic of all three of us being on the same team this season.
Yes.
We're getting in a handful of questions. We're kind of dominating scrums, and it's been a pleasure so far working with you guys. So shout out to you guys. But Ross Colton.
Shout out to you, JJ.
Ross Colton was hands down my favorite person to talk to last year. Haven't gotten to talk to him. Haven't gotten
He's
to check
another.
in with him.
Yeah.
Excited to do so.
Very honest. I was happy to get to talk to Duran at his stall today because we got him at Media Day, and again, as we've documented on this show, that was definitely a coached responses. Hey, this is the first time you've seen anyone. Here's some of the stuff they're going to ask you about. He's very honest, including how he feels about the practice jerseys.
Yeah, let's not spoil it.
Let's not spoil it.
Check out the interview, and you'll get his candid response on how he genuinely feels about the new Fanatics practice jerseys. Other than that, I think we're good for the day, right?
Yes,
so.
we are.
Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us here at Guerilla Sports. We'll be back all weekend. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Still got plenty of magnets. Come and let us know if you want one. Other than that, hope to see you guys tomorrow. If not, we'll see you right here on the show. For Jesse, Megan, I'm JJ, Guerilla Sports.